Labour is considering an inheritance tax raid to redistribute wealth if it gets into power, according to a leaked recording from Shadow Chief Secretary Darren Jones.
It comes as Good Morning Britain's latest poll shows Labour's lead has slipped a bit for the first time. We're joined by Labour's National Campaign Coordinator, Pat McFadden. Right, tax is a massive issue for people because it impacts the state of the economy and the cost of living for individuals. And, of course, we have the news this morning that apparently you're going to launch an inheritance tax raid to redistribute wealth. This is according to the Daily Telegraph. Can you confirm or deny?
This is just nonsense from the Tory attack unit. And they have quite a good transmission belt between them and some of the Tory newspapers. What Darren Jones was pointing out was just the fact that an inheritance tax exists. He actually doesn't say anything in this recording about changing it or increasing it at all. So I don't know where that comes from, but it does exist. And actually, it's quite an important point here because during the campaign, the Tories have said quite a lot about Labour will tax your car or they'll tax your house or tax something. Without reminding people that they already tax these things already. Inheritance tax exists. It's existed for 14 years of the Conservative government. That's all Darren Jones was saying. OK,
let me read you the paragraph. Darren Jones, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, of course, a Labour colleague of yours, told a public meeting he expected the, quote, political consensus, unquote, to be that inheritance tax should be used to address, quote, intergenerational inequality, unquote. I suppose the idea behind that might be quite a reasonable Labour principle, that if you die with huge pots of money, why not tax that for the good of other people rather than just hand it down to your children who haven't earned it?
Well, what you've described is the situation that exists. That's
so why not increase it? The argument is, why not increase it?
Well, as we've said throughout the campaign, none of our plans require an increase in taxes. That remains as true today as it did 4 or 5 weeks ago when we started the campaign, 6 weeks ago, in fact. But that tax exists, and it does what you just said when you read out the quote.
So you're saying, because we hear this line a lot, no plans to increase taxes beyond what's in the manifesto. So are you ruling out any changes to inheritance tax, including any changes to the threshold at which it comes in?
I'm saying what we said about tax throughout the campaign. We are 6 weeks exactly since Rishi Sunak stood in the rain in Downing Street to call the election. And from that moment, we've said that nothing in our manifesto requires us to raise any taxes beyond the very specific things that we set out in the manifesto. Really interesting. That remains the position on this, as with anything else.
And for people watching, of course, we know that your manifesto, all the spending plans, apart from a couple of very specific taxes, all your spending plans rely on growth. Growth has been very stubborn. You might blame 14 years of Tory government for that, or you might blame Ukraine or pandemic. If you don't get the growth that you need to pay for all the measures in your manifesto, would you consider a change to inheritance tax?
Well, you're asking me to admit defeat on the growth front before the election has even taken place. So you might not be surprised to know that's not something I want to do. And the reason we put this at the centre of the election campaign is because it is the challenge facing the country. And it's really important to try to do something about it. And if we'd kept the rate of growth that we had when my party was last in power, the economy would be £150 billion bigger today than it currently is. And the Exchequer would have tens of billions of pounds more money for public services without changing any tax rates at all. So growth is really important. That's why we've prioritised it. And, you know, I don't know what the verdict of the voters will be tomorrow. But if they do elect a Labour government, it will be a big priority for a Labour government if we are elected.
Can I ask you about the polls, Mr McFadden, Pat? We had the Westminster SNP leader on yesterday who said that whether or not it's a Tory or a Labour government, austerity is going to carry on in Westminster. The IFS says big cuts to public spending in the current plans if Labour wins. The latest poll for the Scotsman, the Savanta poll, now has the SNP back ahead of Labour in Scotland. Now, you are a Wolverhampton MP, but obviously you're a Scot as well. On this poll, Labour would get half the number of seats that Labour got in 2010, maybe even smaller a fraction to compare to Tony Blair in 1997. Why is Labour still doing so badly in Scotland? Is it because of this continuing austerity on public spending?
Well, let's see what the voters say tomorrow. I've taken the position on all the polls throughout this campaign for people to really encouraging people to ignore them, because I'm sorry to use a cliche, but the only poll that matters is the one that takes place tomorrow, when real voters go to the polls to make real choices rather than expressing an opinion to pollsters. So let us see what happens. I mean, in a way, I'm glad you asked the question, because 2 months ago, when I was on this show and we just had the local elections, I remember you challenging me then, Ed, on we weren't doing well enough. And the Tories were also saying this. They were saying there was going to be a coalition of chaos. Now they're saying something very different. I don't know how many Labour MPs the Tories think we're allowed to have, but I'm glad they don't get to dictate the outcome and that it's in the hands of the voters tomorrow, both in Scotland and the rest of the UK.
Can I just ask, Pat McFadden, before we let you go, is if Sir Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister, does he clock off for the weekend at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening?
Honestly, this is such nonsense. First of all, I think it's a good thing if somebody wants to have some time with their family one evening a week. And part of that is, of course, Friday night dinner is an important part of the Jewish tradition in his wife's family. I mean, would anyone criticise a politician for saying, I want to go to church on Sunday? I don't think they would. This is just such desperate stuff. Frankly, I hope he spends a few hours on a Friday evening with his family, because I think that does us all a lot of good.
It'll be OK anyway, because Pat McFadden will be there in Downing Street, late into the night, 7 days a week.
Yeah, do you ever take any time off?
Well, I'm hoping to at some point, but, you know, I thought you'd asked me to sing this morning, but it's not happened yet.
OK, yeah.
Oh, go on.
All right. OK, if you think that's going to be the decider, what's your karaoke tune and can you give us a burst?
I wouldn't do it. I cannot match my colleague, Jonathan Ashworth. When I saw him doing this on Monday, I thought, here we go for the rest of the week.
Pat McFadden, you cannot tee yourself up in that way. You cannot say, I want to audition to be in Simon Cowell's new boy band and then not deliver. You've got to give us at least a line. Come on, don't let us down.
My boy band days are over. My musical hero is Bruce Springsteen. But I do not know whether on Friday we're going to be in the promised land or back in the Badlands. The voters will decide.
OK.
Very good. I mean, I wouldn't call that singing.
No.
It's not.
But it was kind of poetic.
Or even humming. Pat McFadden, thank you very much indeed.